for anyone watching this video, I want to, make everyone aware of who you are and what you stand for. I've got a little blurb here. Apparently you have served in the mental health industry for almost 4 decades. This is Dr. Fred Moss, who we have here. So almost 4 decades in the mental health industry.
This January 5th will mark, in 2 months will mark officially 4 decades.
There you go, fantastic. And you've consulted with patients, practitioners, medical faculties, non-profit organizations, community groups, as a non-diagnosis psychiatrist, and we'll get into that. I think that's really interesting, a non-diagnosis psychiatrist. You are very active in shifting the conversation on mental illness on a global scale. And Dr. Fred Moss's services include mental health coaching, speaking, telehealth training, and expert witness testimony. That's interesting. You're also working on a film project called Global Madness, which is a fantastic title, I've got to say. You're a graduate of Northwestern University Medical School and a licensed psychiatrist. Anyway, there's a long list of things I could say about you. You've been in the game for a long time, to say the least. But what I find is most fascinating about you, Fred, and what's really drawn me to you in this conversation is just, you're sort of like me. You're sort of a black sheep in the industry, and you're sort of good at naming the pink elephant in the room. And you're naming it in a field where it's a big risk to name the pink elephant in the field you're in, I take it, and you've really stuck your neck out on this one. And I want to just let you dive in a little bit and tell us about, what's the main theme of your message, and so where have you derived that from? What's the experience you've had that's made that such an important message in your own life? Sure.
Thank you. Yeah, it's so I'll give you a little bit of a shortened version, but she'll try to catch the salient points. Ever since I was a child, I've really noticed as I've looked back at this recently, ever since I was a child, I've been really just entertained or entranced with the whole notion of the value of communication, of people being together and communicating. I grew up in a household where I had 2 brothers, 10 and 14 years older than me, and then my parents. And I would watch these adults, from my playpen sometimes even, where they would be having some sort of something, and then they would get with each other and speak to and listen, and then life would change. And there was just something like, wow, that is a cool tool. Like, I want to learn how to do that. And as I went through school, I started realizing that I too really enjoyed listening and really enjoyed speaking, and really got to see the value of it. It was like, oh, this is the essence of the world. Like, I really got that communication, connection is the essence of the world. That's what makes things happen in this world. So when I was in junior high, I thought, well, I'll go learn how to do it. In high school, these big guys, they must learn how to communicate, because I can't wait to go to high school where they finally teach me how to formally communicate. Suffice it to say, that didn't happen in high school at all. And so I was like, okay, I'll go to college. That's where it is. I'll go to the University of Michigan, where, all sorts of great stuff happens. Yeah. And for sure, I'll communicate there. And it took about 6 days in the dorm to realize that wasn't going to happen there either. So when I left college, I actually, this was 4 decades ago this January, I got a job, working in childcare work. And all of a sudden, my communication with these kids was making a difference, and then I was getting paid for it. And it was like, wow, this communication thing does really work. And so I really saw that I could make a difference working the afternoon shift with these kids in a state hospital. And I was like, I think I should go be a doctor. I should go be a doctor so I can ride to the top and start making decisions on how this goes, because the doctors didn't seem to really, it seemed like there was a role there for me to make a difference. So with a lot of good fortune, I was able to be a doctor and then do a residency and go to psychiatry as directed. And right around that same time, biological psychiatry was coming into fruition. It's like, was coming into the vogue. So while I was in medical school, Prozac was introduced to the world. And over the next 12 years, Prozac was the #1 drug prescribed in the world, all specialties included, for 12 straight years. And
wow.
So, and that includes all specialties, and that includes the entire world. And so it was like the whole field of psychiatry turned on its ear. Instead of I was now going to learn how to communicate, I got the rug pulled out from under me one more time. And now I was going to learn how to be a biological psychiatrist, to fix these so-called chemical imbalances. And I was going to only be referred patients after everybody who had tried to already talk to them. And I wasn't even going to be asked to be the communicator. I was just going to be asked to be the distributor.
The pusher.
Exactly.
The pusher, basically.
It really is. And, at the time, it was like, well, that's my job. I make a lot of money. I have a lot of power. I'm at the top of this so-called totem pole. I guess that's just how it's become. And I didn't lose I did some training in psychoanalysis. I did my own therapy. Always hung on to communication, but I was getting to be an odd duck being a psychiatrist who actually communicates.
Go figure.
As the field went on over the next 30 years, I began my actually being a psychiatrist I graduated medical in '88, so something like 30 years ago. I really became less and less counted on for my communication, and I just saw patients as not getting as well as I thought they could if connected to. So about 2006, I started taking medicines away from people who seemed like they no longer needed it. They were doing pretty well. Let's give it a try. Low-risk patients, and I'd take away their medicines, and that we were never taught how to do that. And it would be like, wow, extraordinary results would surface. Patients would get not just better, but they would be their diagnosis would disappear. So this was a startling, astonishing effect, and not so shocking actually, but nevertheless startling and astonishing. So I started using this with other patients, and I began to get this notion that maybe the condition itself was perpetuating the symptoms that it was marketed to treat, or the condition and the treatment were doing that. So I started using a little bit, you see what I'm saying? And so I started doing it with even a little bit higher risk patients, patients who thought that they had chronic mental illness, and the same thing would happen. After a short period of time of being uncomfortable when the medicines were removed, they would get their lives back on a regular basis. These people would get their lives back.
So let me just ask there, because obviously, we're going to have, if any psychiatrist is listening to this, and anyone who is responsible for distributing some of these psych drugs, obviously there's some contraindications with it, because if you just take them off the psych drugs,
not simple. You're right, and it's
not simple, right? So we're not talking you just simply took them off.
No, we're not talking about that at all. No.
So define that a little more
sure. Well, not only is it not simple, you have to have somebody who really is being done. They're they really get that this is as good as it's going to get, or they've gotten worse over time, and they're no longer interested in the same pathway that's gotten them to be who they are. So this is a group of people that are specially chosen. And the other thing about these, so I think if you fast forward a little bit, it isn't that I'm saying that the drugs alone are causing the symptoms they're marketed to treat. That's why I moved to non-diagnosing rather than simply non-medicating.
Okay, explain that. That's interesting.
Yeah, so non-medicating was one thing. Maybe the medications aren't doing as good as they are supposed to, or maybe they're actually causing side effects or symptoms of their own. But if you really back up one more step, and so with the diagnoses, as soon as I say to someone, or someone says to someone, that you have a condition that leaves you different than normal, or leaves you afflicted, or leaves you outcast, then we create a future for that person, who then buys that future as a way of, in fact, relinquishing whatever responsibility they have for the control of their life.
Fantastic. Absolutely. Got it.
All right.
And not only that, but it's also making them feel special in a sense that, you know,
Oh,
now
there's
I've been
all
labeled
sorts
with
of
this,
positives.
it's like, I'm special now. I have a legitimate condition that makes me very special.
Exactly. And you know what? It's not like it's bad or wrong. It's like we all like to feel special. And in fact, there's some real value. If I'm going to be a jerk, if I'm going to make terrible errors, if I'm going to hurt somebody, if I'm going to say something I later regret, if I am going to do something that is actually self-injurious, and I can explain away any of those things by saying I have a condition, I'm in.
Yeah, you're totally validated. You've completely formatted and validated the you know, the victim response. And this is, you know, I know this, it sort of sounds harsh. I know it sounds so harsh to say, but they're playing this I'm special, I'm pathological card. You know, I've got the illness, I'm the victim card. But it's not like as if they're doing it volitionally or consciously.
Exactly.
No, it's an inbuilt sort of.
It's attractive.
I mean, if someone has that much stress and really under a lot of tension in the world, in life, you know, as soon as they're not only given the opportunity, but promoted the opportunity to relinquish that responsibility, it's like, I'll have at it. You know, like that people are going to line up for that around the block.
It's interesting, you know, taking. You and I know, and I think that might be where we're at with the transformation or the transitions of what's going on inside of, you know, our men's work, which is the opportunity to really take a look at the value of being accountable and responsible for one's life, even when what you do flies against who you would want yourself to be. Like really getting that even when you're a jerk, that's really part of being a man, part of being a human.
It's not some unique condition.
It really isn't. It really, really isn't. And even when you're depressed or confused or aimless or anxious or nervous or even hearing the little chatter in your head or wishing harm on somebody or yourself, like, Welcome to Humanity is the name of my hashtag. And that's what that's where I run. It's Welcome to Humanity is what we're talking about. So
got it. Brilliant.
We fast forward so that we're no longer blaming Big Pharma or blaming doctors. We're actually saying that once you come to me like, what's wrong with me? And I say, yes, indeed, there's something wrong with you. And you say, oh, good. What is it? And I say, you have X. And you say, yay, I got X that explains everything.
Yeah, right. Unreal.
And I say, I'm glad I don't have X.
Yeah.
Because if I had X, I wouldn't be able to see that you do.
Yeah.
So as a diagnosis, I have all sorts of, it's great for me to diagnose people. It leaves me untouchable. And it's great to be diagnosed. It's great. The whole thing is really great. It really is. It's really great. There's no one to blame. There's not the medicine people to blame or the doctors or the patients or the family. Like everybody gets value here.
Yeah, everyone gets validated on some level. Yeah,
they really do.
Yeah, and not in a healthy way, but in like the dysfunctional aspect of us gets validated very succinctly. Yeah.
You know, I think, Sal, the thing that's really great that, you know, in this 39th year and the 40th year is I've you know, it's taken a while to get to the place where I can be presentable about this and not just be furious.
Don't lose the fury, brother.
Yeah, the idea is that people are it's possible to be compassionate with everyone involved in the game.
Yeah. That's an interesting point. Including let's talk about that, because that's a whole nother level, like including the pharmaceutical companies.
Exactly.
All right, so tell me about that. So how would you say? So let's look at
the pharmaceutical company.
Yeah, so that's a good way to go. That's like as Jordan Peterson would say, giving the devil its due. Let's say. You know?
Yeah. So let's look at that. So listen, the #1 most profitable industry in the history of planet Earth is the pharmaceutical company presently in the Western world.
It's outpaced even the
gross
the
national
military,
product.
the military complex, the
Right.
military industrial, yeah,
Greater than the military complex.
even greater. It's number
Now,
one.
you can't really knock some, I mean, in some ways it's like, wow, that's very successful. Like, and it isn't like, in other words, they didn't put it in the water. They prescribed, you can't blame the rat poison people for designing rat poison. It is a whole system that has it be that you or someone actually runs to the pharmacy, fills it, takes off the top twice a day and eats it. There's something to that that isn't entirely about the manufacturers of the drug itself.
There needs to be a market as much as a producer. You know, the producer doesn't exist in a vacuum, is what you're saying.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, I suppose it's an argument that we hear most recently inside the gun firearms industry, the same thing, where Smith & Wesson isn't who's on fire here.
Yeah.
Not only them.
Yeah.
The gun makers don't pull the trigger, after all. And the drug makers don't force in any way. There's a whole cascade of system that happens before mom waits in line at the pharmacy 2 hours a week to get her medicine, to come home and sort them and eat them.
There's a lot invested in that.
There's a lot.
Yeah. And
what
so it speaks right to the shadow of the human nature, you know, in general.
Exactly.
You know, yeah.
And
so it's deeper than this bad guy and this victim. It's a deeper underlying shadow aspect of human nature itself.
It really is. And you can start getting, in case you don't, I mean, I knew some drug representatives when I was doing more conventional work. In fact, I did some work with one of the big drug companies where I was a speaker for one of the medications. And I had some very friendly relationships with drug representatives and pharmacists inside of some of these drug companies that were just fine people, really fine people. Like, please move in next door kind of people.
Got it. Yeah. Were they aware of the sort of, but it's one thing to be fine, but I guess it's also another thing to be just completely ignorant of the underlying condition that, and the shadow that these companies are playing into. Are they aware of it, or are they just completely oblivious to it?
That is not the perspective that they have about what they do. What they have is research and development that supports the betterment of humankind by the result of better living through chemistry.
Right. Got it.
And they are quite certain that that's the industry that they have thrown their life at for the betterment of humanity. And one cannot knock that. Who wouldn't want to be part of the betterment of humanity? Yeah. So you start looking at each and every piece and the absolute beauty of the lattice that has been created inside the organization, which sort of starts with the individual being so certain that they are abnormal, that they seek help to be confirmed that they are. And that's one place that the cascade really starts. Yeah, well, that's what, like, I want to come back to that, because I think that's really what's very key and what's the most powerful aspect of your message. Because we talk a lot about the big bad guy, you know, in pharmaceutical, and the big bad guy and the military complex, and the big bad guy in the government. We talk about the big bad guys out there and the poor victims in here. But I think what's really important about your message is that it's an intrinsic, like a tapestry that you talk about, like a whole tapestry here. And the only way for as an individual to unweave that tapestry, to untangle yourself from that tapestry, let's say, is to understand the narrative that's at play to begin with, that you're buying into to begin with, i.e., oh good, like you said, oh good, now I've been diagnosed with X. I feel something, I feel special, I feel like there's some way that it's confirming something about me, in which, like you said, it's like I can relinquish a lot of my responsibility. And I think that's a great relief, fundamentally, is the relief of responsibility. And I think that's, and we're not talking just like, you know,
we're talking a deep existential responsibility here, not just a trite sort of, I'm responsible to take the rubbish out or to pay my bills. It's like, no, responsibility for my existence itself.
Exactly.
That's really where the real thread comes undone, when you start to reclaim that relationship with existence. So
exactly.
So tell me this. So lead me through it, because I know it's come a long way since Prozac, right? So now we've got the SSRIs, and I want to go into a little bit more about the SSRIs and the monster that's really eating American children and people in general. I think it's one of the greatest. You know, I think we've given the devil its due, as you've explained, but I think it's worth looking at, like, why, you know, how such insurmountable evidence of the damage that these things can do has been so vastly overlooked by large organizations, government, policy, you know, people at large, culture at large. You know, when I look at the shootings, for example, when I see these rampant shootings all around America that aren't happening in the rest of the world, they are only happening in America. Well, there's some happening out there, but not in the prolific way they're happening here. And the research that's been done, the fairly conclusive research that's been done on pretty much all of the perpetrators, is that they were on some heavy duty SSRIs or coming off of some scheduled, you know, dosage, and they were messed up. I mean, their depression had reached a point of like absolute murderous intent. And tell me, like, why is that to me, that's just a pink elephant in the room that no one's talking about. So why is that?
So there's a number of questions here, and I'd like you to consider the possibility of leaving them in question form rather than me giving you an answer to the question. So there's a couple things.
What do you think? Why do you propose, or even if you don't agree with that? I mean, do you agree with that for one? And if so, why do you think?
Yeah,
so I know it's a pretty loaded question.
Well, there's a number of questions there's a number of questions that you're proposing here that I think leave us in inquiry more than anything else. So again, number one, I think we have to be very careful not to point the finger at look, again, if people were eating rat poison as a way of managing, you know, warts, we wouldn't blame rat poison for the problem. And so it's really important to get that this is a complex, that it's not the terrible SSRIs in the same way that it wouldn't be the terrible rat poison that's doing it. It's a complex of multiple different variants working together to create a system that everybody gladly goes forward in the wheel in. Everyone takes the next step in the wheel to make the whole thing a cycle that continues to persist. So the other thing is that the SSRIs are not any more or less evil than any of the other psychiatric medications. It's very rare that someone is simply on an SSRI and that's all. These days, almost everybody is given multiple different combinations of medicines. And also with the street drugs that people use, whether that be alcohol or marijuana-based drugs, or if, you know, any kind of crystal methamphetamines, or if people use, even the food that we eat is tainted frequently. It's like, you know, there's our food supply is frequently non-edible. You know, there's nothing edible about most of the food that people eat every day. And the Food and Drug Administration is called the Food and Drug Administration because it's the same administration. That's why food and drugs are like the same people who make decisions about McDonald's being food are the people who make decisions about Prozac being good for you. So the other piece here is that these drugs have they've gone through enough changes that, you know, Prozac is no longer Prozac. So after the 12 years or whatever, given some companies have different patent periods, the drug then goes to generic, and the generic is absolutely nothing, not even close to what the original medicine was. And yet we buy it as if it's the same.
Right.
And so these things are made in third world countries. They're made at the lowest level. You know, they have to win a
Equality.
Yeah, it's
equality.
not. There's not seen. There no once they fall off a patent, there's nobody watching. The FDA is not responsible for it anymore.
Wow.
And so there's a bidding war that takes place between the generic made in Pakistan and the generic made in Bangladesh and the generic made in Guadalajara, and you know, whoever has the lowest one is the one that Target or Walmart or, you know, wow, Walgreens buys that month. And that's why the colors of your drugs change every month. And that's why you pay $4 for your drugs, because and that's why there's a pharmacy on every corner, because the profit margin is $3.99 plus for every $4 that you pay.
Yeah, that's
and
why. That's
no one's watching this stuff.
Yeah.
No one's watching this stuff. In the same, look, bread, Wonder Bread, and German chocolate cake both have wheat as their
main
active ingredient.
Right, the main substrate.
To suggest for a second that we're going to replace German chocolate cake with the same amount of wheat in Wonder Bread and call it the same is insane.
Right.
But the public buys that too.
Yeah. Yeah, they're not interested in what's really inside
it says on the bottle, generic equivalent to or substitute for, and we just go, cool, we're getting a great deal. Thank God we have insurance. $4 gets us a drug that used to cost us $400, when in fact nothing's the same. It's such a cluster. It's such a cluster in the end.
Yeah.
But here's the thing I really want to get forth to our viewers, Sal, and to you maybe, and to me, which is really that the responsibility for what I put in my mouth is mine. Period.
Yeah, well, that's true.
Period.
Yeah.
Period.
Got it. That's the real big takeaway. I mean, really, it's the big takeaway. And not only that, but I think also it comes back, it's a full circle back to what you said originally. It was like, what is the story we're making up about ourselves that makes us so willing to give away responsibility to these things?
Thank you. Let's take a break for 1 second. I gotta get a cord. If you want to hit pause, I'll be right back.
Yeah.
All right.
There you go. Good time. Yeah. All right, we are back with Mr. Fred Moss.
Yeah, I think that we're looking at a couple things, and I think if we're really going to make any headway here, we're going to have to spend time not too much time villainizing the evilness of certain components of the cycle. I think what we have here, Sal, which is what I'm so attracted to what you're up to, and I think vice versa, is we have an opportunity to look from now forward on how we can make a difference in the narrative to bring forth to men in our case, but all people, what's available to, like, what is it? Why would I want to be responsible for a life where I'm screwing up every day?
Yes. Yeah.
What's the draw? Look, if I have the opportunity to be responsible for my life, and I do, I don't know about you, I screw up like many times per day, and sometimes terribly. If I could, and I don't like it, I don't like that experience. I don't like being responsible for being an asshole. I don't like that. And if I could give that up to you, where I could blame you for me being an asshole, I would do that in a second. And
the human condition 101.
I get to do that inside of the world of the medical of the mental health institution, mental health and mental illness. I get to do that. Now, here's a funny fact. Not ha-ha funny, but funny. And that is, there is no medical specialty. If mental health is considered a medical specialty, which of course it is, although I contend that it might not be such, but if it is, there's no medical subspecialty for which when you see a doctor and you're told you're okay, you get upset, except in mental health. If people come—
Oh, right. Interesting. That's the interesting point. Yeah, got it.
People come to see me and I say, you don't have a problem? Boom. They are
not happy about that.
They are pissed.
Damn, isn't that the crap? But if you're coming in for a doctor for a medical, some biological—
Yeah. Do I have prostate cancer? No, I don't. Oh, good.
Oh, fantastic. I'm great.
Do I have high blood pressure? Oh, good. Do I have mental illness? No. I'm going to go find me a real doctor who tells me that I do.
He can really confirm how fucked up I am. Yeah.
Why did I come to see you if it was to hear that I didn't have a psychiatrist?
Yeah, right. Dude, well, that's a really interesting point. Hey, this is really interesting stuff. This is really getting to the bedrock of what's driving this industry and not driving what the shadow within this whole industry, you know, and within the people that are all embroiled in it. You know.
Yeah. Well, we spend a lot of times pointing fingers at the component that's right adjacent to us. So we might— pharmacy would be— big pharma doesn't give a hoot that people think it's a villain industry. What do they care? They don't care. It's not even that big a deal. Who cares? And some people point at doctors or like insurance companies or it's the DSM or it's whatever,
Yeah.
It's really possible to get.
Yeah. I think for me, some of the greatest turning points in the work I've been doing with men for many years now is coming from that Jungian perspective where, you're really embracing the unconscious. You're not sort of embroiled like a lot of the work, a lot of personal development that I see out there today is very much which has been called the cult of consciousness, which is about it's just like, motivational talk and really self-talk and just really propping oneself up on ideas of themselves and very contrived social norm, socially contrived sort of ideas of what it means to be an upright citizen,
Yeah.
And a vast and a really, what I see is an epidemic cultural denial of the power of the unconscious. What's held below the surface of our mind in a way that's like we're terrified of. We spend so much time trying to categorize and contain every aspect of our thoughts and our feelings and our emotions that we don't understand that there's aspects of us which have been in development over hundreds, millions of years, that they're actually autonomous. They're not. We don't have a conscious. We're not part of that. So I think when people come to you and they say, "Hey, like I'm really fucked up," and you say, "Hey, welcome to humanity," this is you're just feeling aspects of your unconscious bubbling to the surface that you just don't have a way of categorizing or knowing. So let's just, instead of looking at it as a pathology, let's just embrace it as a part of, in fact, let's even celebrate the fact that something has risen to the surface that we can actually accommodate and embrace and use as medicine or as a tool for insight.
Yes.
As opposed to, okay, this is bad, we need to pathologize this, we need to bash this deeper into this unconscious and medicate the fuck out of it. I mean, this is like, to me, one of the greatest issues. This is more of the deeper issue, is the terror of the mystery, the terror that we have of the unconscious mind and how we just medicate ourselves out of it in whatever way possible, whether it's medication or whatever addiction we use to suppress
Yeah.
to suppress these
Well,
things.
I love what you're saying. And at the end, I want to add one thing, which is it would be great if we could medicate ourselves out of it. But by medicating, it doesn't work to do that, unfortunately. And if it could, if it really could, I would probably be a proponent of it. But it doesn't. You know, we don't really take medicine and relieve ourselves of our shadows. In fact, as you notice by what you were saying about the epidemic of the shootings, is that almost all, if not all, of the shootings are done by people who have been on or are on high-powered psychiatric medications or have diagnoses, et cetera, SSRIs and many other types. And the thing that's really, well, you know, the thing that okay, I'll just stop there for that. Yeah. You know, it's just like I think I'm going to add. Uh-oh, you got hesitant. You're frozen. There you go. Try me again. Try me again.
Yeah, I'm letting it catch up. I'll edit this bit out.
Okay.
You're good. You're good. So if you want to say something, start again from here. Otherwise, we'll move on.
Go ahead.
Was there anything else you wanted to say about the SSRIs in general, or?
Well, I just think that it's just like these medicines they're not successful in medicating ourselves out of our shadow. In fact, what happens is our shadow gets even more exposed typically when on medication, because access to the eternal and access to spirituality, access to the collective consciousness is interrupted when we interrupt our thinking and our thought processes with these medications, so that access to our higher power or the collective consciousness or other people is interrupted. And in fact, there may be a sense of a numbness temporarily, but really what's left is someone who is much less likely to be, comfortable than if you, for instance, I like to use this particular analogy for this discussion, which is, if I come to a doctor with a mosquito bite on my elbow, and it's been there for a couple weeks, and it's just irritating. I mean, I can't sleep at night, and I can't get any comfort. And the doctor says, you're very lucky. I'm a mosquitologist. And I have a treatment that works for this, because you got a special kind of mosquito bite. It's like, okay, great, doctor. I knew you would be the great doctor for this. And you say, okay, well, here's the deal. We're going to amputate your arm from the shoulder down. And we guarantee 100% success rate.
You won't have that itch anymore.
You will not have a mosquito bite on your elbow.
That's a good one.
And so you're like, well, cool, anything to get rid of my mosquito bite, because you're so myopic that really you think your only problem is your mosquito bite. Yeah. So the doctor says it's only going to hurt for a minute. We'll do a little bit of anesthesia. Everything will be good. And he pulls out the bandsaw or the jigsaw or whatever kind of saw and slices off your arm. Yeah. And you come back in 2 weeks and they take the microscope off to see if you still have an elbow with a mosquito bite on it. And it turns out that you don't. You got your cure. So are you saying that this is what SSRIs are? Is this not just SSRI? I wouldn't blame it on. Let's say all of it. I am saying that the price of taking these medications is not only do you lose access to the mood that you otherwise would have had, but you lose a whole chunk of your life. Got it. Yeah. Well, there you go. It's a great analogy. Thank you. It's a good one. Yeah. I mean, look, I think, and as you said before, it is a complex, because if you have a teenage who's one, going through hormonal insanity, two, has probably got really poor, statistically speaking, probably has a poor or zero relationship to his father.
3 is, you know, under the pressure of a deeply, you know, identity, you know, the meaningless of education, the meaningless that's been the meaningless that's been imbued in the education system. There's a lot of things going on there, and then you layer on top of that psych drugs, powerful psych drugs. You've got a recipe for some. Oh, and also you layer on top of that access to guns. You've got a recipe major fucking disaster. I mean, so, but I do think that the rational, that slight piece of the mind, that the rational part of the mind that says, okay, it's not going to be a good idea to open up on a classroom full of kids with my AK-47. It's not such a good idea. That critical factor of the mind is like, you got to marvel at what it would take to switch that off. I mean, that's a pretty amazing feat to have that part of the mind turned off.
Yeah,
you got to marvel at that. You know?
It is something, and even see, this is where we start getting back to one of the questions you asked early on, which is, that that coming off the medicines doesn't immediately open those channels. So the channels that are blocked when being off medicines don't immediately just become available upon stopping medicines. Right. So the process of stopping medicines is complicated.
Got it.
And the medicines are the way our physiology works, or the combination of how our physiology works with medications that are blunting us, is that upon the true departure of a medicine, you get a spike of the symptoms that the drug is marketed to treat.
Yeah.
So whether or not you were depressed when you started antidepressants, when you come off of the antidepressants, you will be depressed.
And probably it'll appear to be quite severe, I imagine.
It will appear to be severe, and you will think that this is you returning.
Yeah.
But it's not you returning. It's actually simply a product of what happens when you come off the medicine, but you equate it to the reason you got on it in the first place.
Yeah, interesting.
And then you are left with, well, I didn't like taking medicine, but when I came off, my depression came back in spades, and therefore, given the choice of having the depression that led me to take the medicines in the first place, or the blunted lifestyle, the armless lifestyle I have when I'm on medicine, I'm going to, thank God for the medicine, I'm going to stay on these forever.
Yeah.
And then you become an accomplice for why these medicines can't be stopped.
Yeah. God, it's a vicious cycle, hey? Vicious. Tell me this. I'm sure, like, taking a kid off, or anyone for that matter, off medicine without, let me ask you, what do you think would be other critical factors that need to be included when taking someone off medicine? I mean, you said diet. I'm imagining diet, environment, social influences. Like, I guess there's a bit of a laundry list of crucial factors that need to be in place before someone just goes off meds and hoping that that's going to work. What do you think would be some of the more crucial factors in that transition?
Coming off of medicine is your question?
Yeah.
Well, there's a readiness, there's a willingness, there's a being tired enough. There's this, the idea of being sick and tired of being sick and tired comes to play here. The idea that the willingness to consider other possibilities. There are some situations, an unfortunate amount of situations, for which well, I wouldn't say it's necessarily unfortunate, it's just what's so, to which continuing miserably works for the system that you're surrounded by and you. So you as a patient, like in continuing for you to be miserable is perfect.
Right.
And everyone needs you to be miserable and you need to be miserable.
Explain.
There is a lot of mileage that comes from always being miserable.
Oh, you mean, so when you come off the drug.
Like, these are the people who aren't ready to come off medicine.
Oh, okay. So it's
there's an identity that's built into being ongoingly diagnosed and miserable and getting worse.
Right.
So that misery becomes familiar, and familiarity trumps the possibility.
Oh, I see. Yeah, got it. Yeah. It plays into the narrative very nicely, and it makes things very manageable just because of the familiarity of it. For everyone,
at least familiar. It can be unmanageable and familiar, but I'll tell you what, there are some people for which coming off of medicine isn't even a possibility at all. Not at all. Not interested, neither is the rest of the system. Even if they're miserable and getting worse, they have no interest in coming off medicine.
Right. So it's not even an option for some.
It just works. It just works for them to be getting worse. It just works.
Right. Yeah.
And so you can't cure everyone. That's part of the process.
Yeah.
You can't.
Well, I guess, yeah. So I guess fundamentally what you're saying is like, there's all these different factors that need to be, that would help if they're in place when someone wants to get off. But one of the fundamental factors is a willingness to go, I guess there's a willingness to say, I'm sick of being a victim. I'm sick of having no control over my life. I'm sick of not being in the driver's seat. I think fundamentally that must be one of the deepest choices that the person has to make. It's like, I'm not in control of my life at all, and I'm fucking over that. I'm sick of that. Like, what other option is there than that?
Yeah. Well, so here's the thing about what you're saying. Over time, even I know I have an experience of this, and I think you probably do too, which is, sometimes when I'm not feeling on top of my game, and I start to consider, would I even hire him? If I had a choice, would I hire me to be in charge of my life? Right. And the answer is no. Sometimes no.
That's honest.
I am not qualified.
That's honest.
And so I think in many cases with people who have diagnoses in mental illness, the notion that I want to take control of my life has long been left in the rearview mirror. Thank goodness I don't have control of my life, because I couldn't do it even if I did.
Wow, that's a brutal statement, but I get the truth, and I get that that's where a lot of people are coming from at that stage. Yeah, right. I mean, far out. I mean, it just makes you of the human will, the sovereign will of the human being. It's like it's a precious. It's not a small thing. It's a very precious. It's a precious asset we have, the ability to have the will to choose between a life of misery and a life of thriving and magic. I mean, it's not just new age speak.
No.
It's a fundamental aspect of what makes us exist.
It's interesting as you say it, and it isn't like I had this answer waiting, but as you say it, you had it as a sort of binary, misery versus a life of thriving magic. And what I think I hear you say, maybe based on our previous discussion, is in order to live a life of thriving magic, one needs to incorporate the misery that's inherent in being alive. It's not like in spite of. It's inclusive. Exactly.
Because as the Sufis say, the wound, or in this case, the misery, the wound is the gateway to the soul. And what they mean by that is and I know you understand what I'm saying when I describe this, is when you work with a human being, you can see that you can see the cycle of misery that the loop of misery that they're so addicted to. And if that was to collapse, then they would drop into such a deep well of existence. The deepest well of their existence is going to become available to them. And that's really scary for a lot of people, or to anyone really, the vastness of who they are outside of their idea of self. And so you're opening up a real can of worms there, but you're also opening up the massive potential of who that person can be. So it's you can't experience your fullest potential without, you know, dropping into the deepest can of worms that's your life as a human being, and on all the inherent pain that goes along with being a human being.
Yeah.
You know, as the old saying goes, pain is inherent, suffering is optional. You know?
Yeah.
The pain of living, breathing, and having a body is inherent, but you know, the narrative you make up around these things is optional. But yeah, it's like you said, like we can't access our greater nature without letting it all in, you know, embracing every horrible, stinky aspect of ourselves, especially as men, you know. We are stinky, dysfunctional creatures.
You're right. We have it seems like we have a greater access to that kind of pain, at least the ones that I think you and I are talking about. And, you know, that's why one of the things that I think I'm going to go full circle here. I think you have really led a great inquiry, but one of the things that you remind me of is what we really all want more than anything. I'm quite certain of this, going back to me in the playpen, watching my brothers and my parents, is we want to feel heard and connected. We want what we say to land over there. Like it's real important that even in our discussion that you get the idea that I'm hearing what you're saying and that you're hearing what I'm saying. That's what we want more than anything inside of human nature, is to have made a difference or to be heard. Now, what Welcome to Humanity has paid attention to as a brand is that the listening can come from non-vocalized self-expression as well. So the creative aspects of us, like music, art, singing, dancing, drama, cooking, writing, gardening, photography, cleaning, all of those things. Cleaning. So cleaning is number 10 of the list of 10. And it's number 10 because what we're really talking about here is applying the creative force to the world around us. And cleaning,
even on the mundane level,
a
magical experience.
It's an act of creativity, and in that act we then validate ourselves at a very, very high level when we're being self-expressed. And so when you say, people sometimes say, well, Dr. Fred, like, what do you mean you're going to take away all these diagnoses and treatment? Like, what are you going to replace it with? And it's like, well...
Good question. Let's start with your environment. Let's start with cleaning up your shit. Let's start with creating something just small, a reflection of yourself. I mean, it's true what you say. I mean, you know, cleaning up, you often hear, you know, military sergeants saying, you know, make your bed in the morning as the first act you do. And it's not just some trite idea. It's what you're doing is cleaning up. You're externally referencing an internal state of being.
Yes, exactly.
And it's internal. You're cleaning up your bedroom. You're making your bed, but you're making your bed. It's inside that you're making your bed, and that it's a very sacred. You know, this most mundane act can become a sacred act.
Exactly.
I think these are really important keys for anyone looking to climb their way out of a hole of depression or self-annihilation. It's really to see the sacred in the most mundane things.
Yes.
You know, Fred, we're going to wrap this up. I want to just, you just tell us a little bit more about your movie project, about what you're doing, about how people can reach you, about like what's on offer. I mean, because this is a really, you know, I don't know if I mean, this is, I don't know if anyone else gets the importance of this conversation, but it's to me, it's profound. And to me, it's one of the key turnstones that's going to make a difference in, especially in America, which is just so addicted to this. The opioid crisis here is just insane. And I think it's one of the major conversations going to start emerging this decade. Like it's a pink elephant that's like, it's so fat that it's impossible not to see it now. So I really applaud you for
Thank you.
having such an articulate, and not in an articulate way, but having, you know, having boots on the ground with this thing, and actually being out there affecting change in whatever way you can, you know, in real life, not just talking about it. So I really applaud you for that.
Sure.
So how can people reach you and learn more about what you do and the movie
Right.
you're involved with? Tell us about that.
Right. So, you know, I'm up to lots of things, and basically it looks like 5 prongs, and the 5 prongs sort of come like 5 prongs as part of a hand, and the 5 prongs are all related to each other, and they're all part of the hand. So the best way to get a hold of me is you can DM me on Facebook at the Dr. Fred Moss, where you can find me, or through Welcome to Humanity, which is my group, or through Global Madness, which is, my Global Madness is my page, and Welcome to Humanity is my group on Facebook. But you can also write me to Dr. Fred at welcometohumanity.net, Dr. Fred at welcometohumanity.net. And you can find me, you know, there's a couple different spaces. I have a LinkedIn campaign going.
Sure.
I have some YouTube, but
Sure.
Like, and
So
here's
tell us about the movie. Tell us about the movie.
Let me tell you about the movie. The movie's called Global Madness. It's a brainstorm sort of. What the story is that last year I was involved in putting something together called Intercontinental Psychiatry, and what I had there was that I wanted an office in all 7 continents, and I wanted people to be able to come to the office, virtually or real, with the mental illness and leave without one. And I thought that the process could be 2 or 3 months. So I told a bunch of people that last year, and they're all like, "You're nuts, you're crazy. That's not going to work. Why would you do that?" You know, and I was like, all right, maybe I don't know what's going on here, because I feel very comfortable that I could do that, but they didn't feel so comfortable. So I got this idea that maybe I don't know what's going on globally to the mental health world, and maybe I'm not expert enough, or I don't have the
Right.
So what would happen if I went like Anthony Bourdain did, or I went like Dan Jones, or I went like Sanjay Gupta, and I went off to the world and really saw how mental health and mental illness is dealt with in various culturally diverse areas of the planet. And what happens to people who are outcasts in various cultures, because I know for sure that they get handled differently in various areas. We've picked out a number of areas already: Norway and Finland and Australia and Tanzania and Rwanda and others.
Wow.
And we're going to go there and interview the people who are involved: the caregivers, the patients, the families, the shaman, the medicine men, people who are of nature. And really get a notion. See, here's the ultimate outcome. The ultimate outcome is that we will see that there is no such thing inherently as mental illness, that it is a function of the culture that you're in only. And like when you got a broken bone, there's such thing as a broken bone. You take that broken bone to Rwanda, you still have a broken bone. You take that broken bone to Auckland, New Zealand, it's still broken, I promise.
Still a broken bone. Yeah.
But that's not true with this notion of mental illness at all. It changes. And
mental illness is going to have if you're with a shaman in the middle of Ecuador, you know, he's going to see mental illness in a very different way than your psych.
Or maybe not even see it, which is what the real question is that mental illness is just a conversation. And because it's just a conversation, it's subject to immediate and total profound transformation.
Yeah.
That's what we're here to do. And we're going to do that in an entertaining way. I've got a documentary team, and maybe I can be, you know, with a little bit of training, I probably can be an interviewer with a level of at least charisma to be entertaining, like to be compelling.
Well, you get to speak. You get to communicate. That's the thing you were born to do. So
exactly. We get to lean back on what I think is really the
where it all started.
Exactly.
Where it all started in communication. So thanks, Fred. Look, this has been a really great talk, and I really implore people to really, and men especially. I mean, women and men, but I think I mean, it's definitely, statistically speaking, men are the ones doing themselves in a lot more these days. And I think men need to understand their psychological health. Yeah, they need to understand their psychological health on a whole new level, and start thinking differently about it. Like not, it doesn't have to. They don't have to think about it in a pathological sense. They can think about it more in a creative sense, and that's definitely my work and the work I've been, with the Alchemy of Man and the work I'm attempting to bring into the world. And so we're on the same page, man. I really appreciate what you're doing.
Sure.
And I hope everyone can contribute their understanding of what we've just talked about and build on that conversation, because it's a bloody important conversation. It's one of the.
Well, the other thing I want to say, Sal, thank you for that note, for the acknowledgement. I think the other thing I want to say is we're building a group not only of people who are like interested in watching me or watching what we do, but also a group of people who might want to bring their own power, skills, or interests into assisting moving some of these conversations forward. We call them the CCIA. Basically, they're called creative. The CCIA, and so these are the
say it again. Just say that again.
Conversation creators in action. The CCIA. Conversation
creators in action. Oh,
yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. So these are people who can come aboard, and they might have some super skill or some interest or some history of wanting to make a difference with us, and we can use that skill to make sure that as you hop on board, that you're utilizing what it is you want to use to make a difference in the world.
Yeah, fantastic. I like that, Fred. Thanks very much for your time. I really appreciate it. Dr. Fred Moss, welcome to humanity.org. .net. Welcome to humanity.net. Check it out. Follow Fred, and everyone listening to this, like, find your place in this conversation, and let's move the needle, because it's a really important needle to move. Great talking to you, Fred. I look forward to our next chat.
Really great, Tom. Thanks so much.